good afternoon. Can you all hear me? You can? You can. Now I assume everybody else can. Okay, we have a lot to cover today, believe it or not. It's just a remainder of section 2. And then on Wednesday I'll do a review. I'll do a review on this. Yes. And I think on Thursday evening, 5 to 6, I will also be available to answer questions, if there are. And of course, there's also the office hour. And you will care because this week there is an exam, right? And a lot of what's going on today might be on the exam. So we are looking at transport systems. What I mean with transport systems is how are different transporters put together in a system in the cell so that it works. And so we've seen that in mammalian cell membranes, that includes our cells, this sodium potassium transporter is incredibly important. And it takes 3 sodium out, 2 potassium in, 3 sodium out, 2 potassium in, at the expense of 1 ATP. And that sets up then 2 gradients, the potassium concentration gradients. There's a lot of potassium in the cell, and there's not so much out. And for sodium, low concentrations in the cell, and there's a lot out. And especially that gradient of sodium is used to take up other substances by means of the action of co-transport systems, for instance, the glucose importer. In this case, 2 sodium move down gradient, that's favored, to allow for the uptake of glucose into a compartment with a higher concentration. By itself, not a favored reaction, but coupled with 2 sodium, that now becomes possible. Now, this transport system isn't yet complete because my phone is too close. What's going on? Take less volume. So the system isn't complete because we see that, let's just say the cell is taking up glucose and it's metabolizing that glucose, meaning it's breaking it down. So, okay, we can take up glucose, sodium comes in, and that's not a problem because the sodium is removed by the pump. But the pump also takes in 2 potassium. So as this system is working, pretty soon the cell will be stuffed with really too much potassium. So we need an export pathway for potassium. This is often a theme when we think about transporters. If there's a transporter or a pathway for one direction, then we need to have the other direction also. So therefore there's a channel that allows potassium to move out. And that potassium will actually move out to the point where the effects of charge that movement of potassium is creating is in equilibrium with this membrane potential here that's also being generated by this pump. We'll get to that point. For now, it's important to realize that when, by necessity, because we need the pump to set up the sodium gradient, and by necessity there's a potassium gradient, for the pump to keep running, we need to have a pathway for the potassium to get out. So it can get out and later can get in. And all of that is needed for the glucose to ultimately get in. Alright, so this glucose transporter, that's an example of secondary active transport. And you can ask the question, and you should, why is it like this? Why is the energy stored in ATP not used directly to have some kind of a pump that pumps in the glucose? And this all has to do with the entire efficiency of the system. So it's not true that ATP is used because that would be less efficient. And you can ask the question now why. I'll try to explain. So, first a question to sort of break the ice, so to say. Are you enjoying the Olympics? If at all? Sure. Okay. Well, Mr. Putin, you all know, is enjoying the Olympics immensely. He's always there. And he always shows up and he visits different sites, and he's always having some alcoholic beverage. You noted that? Okay. Now, let's say, imaginary, one of us is over there in Sochi. And let's say you want, well, not all of you are over 21, so let's say you want a cup of coffee. And let's say you've had enough of the whole Olympics, and you're actually at the airport and ready to go. So you want one cup of coffee. Now, I have my wallet. So let's just say there is a cup of coffee, and I can pay for my cup of coffee with 20 bucks. And at Putin's Olympics, because 20 bucks is all I have. And at Putin's Olympics, a cup of coffee is priced at, say, the equivalent of $2.50. I don't know. Now, over there in Russia, they're not interested in our dollars, so they'll say, yeah, okay, you can pay with a $20 bill, but we'll give you your change in rubles. Now, I'm leaving on my plane, so those rubles and change are no good to me, my money is lost. I would effectively pay 20 bucks for my cup of coffee if I do this exchange. You got that? Pretty wasteful. That would be the equivalent of taking up my glucose with my ATP. There's a lot of energy stored in ATP, and we don't need all of that energy to take up that one glucose. Instead, what I can do in Sochi, if I want to have a more efficient exchange, and I don't have my excellent coffee shop discount card, I say, hello, you know, $20 I keep it, but do you take a credit card? Do you take a credit card? And yes, and they'll charge the $2.50 with a little exchange, some on top, but more or less I'm paying the real price. The money is taken out of my bank account over here via whatever the international money exchange system. I don't know how that works, but it appears to work. So that's the efficient way, right? Pay with the credit card. You don't pay with cash and get useless things in exchange. And cells also have the credit card system, and it is their ion gradient. So cells put money in the bank. I put money in the bank. See if you pays me, you. That goes in the bank, I can pay for things with my credit card. Cells put things in the bank too. They invest in an ion gradient. And this ion gradient then is tapped into by several transport systems. Not only this glucose uptake system, but also uptake systems for amino acids or other sugars, and even some other ions. So various items can now be taken up. And the amount of energy that is taken out of this ion gradient system is relatively low, whereas the energy stored in ATP is relatively high. Later we'll see how we can quantitatively compare the amount of energy, that currency that's stored in ATP with the amount that's stored in an ion gradient. And now you can also see that it kind of makes sense for this pump to throw out free sodium. It wants to put out as much sodium as it can for the ATP. Now, we can later calculate that this pump is really working at the limit of what it can do. And the fact that we need to take potassium back is just to make it possible so that we don't get too much of a charge difference build up. Because that's my next point. We're building up a charge difference here. But let's stick here to this idea of putting money in the bank. I think you clearly got the message for why it can be more advantageous if you have to pay different items in different currencies to do that with a bank account. Right? Because what you get in exchange is not useful. Cells do the same thing, but their bank account is ion gradients. Very often it's a proton gradient, sometimes it's a sodium gradient, sometimes a potassium gradient, but it's always some kind of a gradient that's used. So the useless thing that we would get back if we would take up this glucose at the expense of the hydrolysis of an ATP is that there would be heat loss. So that's free energy, that's gone. So, I like this point a lot. Also keep in mind that we need just one side to use the ATP to create the ion gradient, and you can have tens, maybe hundreds of different other types of transporters that use that gradient in secondary active transport. So it's also efficient from that point of view. Alright. Second important thing about this type of mechanism. If we exchange here 3 sodium out, 2 potassium in, we're moving net positive charge out. So we're moving 3 plus out, 2 plus in, we have net plus 1 moving out. So we're moving a net charge out. If this would be a proton pumping system, then we would be moving protons across the membrane. That's also a positive charge. So if we are having a gradient of ions, which is maintained by a pump, and the pump is not only moving the ion, just that particle, there's also its charge. So we get concentration differences and we get charge differences. And together, that is called an electrochemical gradient. So an electrochemical gradient is composed of 2 parts. There's the concentration gradient, and what's important there is really the concentration on one side divided by the concentration on the other side. So it's the ratio of reactants. And then directly the membrane potential, that is the voltage difference because of charge differences that we get. So we move excess sodium across, excess positive charge, we get positive out, negative in. That means there is now a potential, an electrical potential or a voltage, and directly in that membrane potential there is energy stored. Also in the concentration gradient for, in this case, sodium, but also for potassium, there is energy stored. And in order to think about that energy, we talk about the electrochemical gradient. And this is the concentration ratios and the membrane potential combined. So ions move in response to both. So if you would have a pathway, like that channel, if I go just one slide back here, and just look back at this potassium channel. So potassium, the movement through the channel, is that favored by the potassium concentrations. Think about that first. And then it's the movement of potassium to your right through the channel. Is that favored by the membrane potential? So think about that for the time it takes me to walk back and forth in the room. Think about it. Okay, so we can take the vote. I always like the vote. So we're having a system, it's set up by this pump. We're only talking about what drives potassium through this channel here. So who thinks that potassium movement through the channel here is favored by the concentrations of potassium? Who thinks it's not? Who doesn't get it? That's also very important. Let me put it another way. So far, no idea. Okay, so ions move, substances move by diffusion through channels, if they can, from a higher to a lower concentration. this sodium potassium pump takes potassium from the outside, puts it in the cell is stuffed with potassium. We're on the inside here on your left. The potassium wants to flow out, so it's favored by the concentration. Is the movement of potassium favored by the membrane potential? We think no. Who said no? Who says yes? And we should take the no, I think. So initially, we have a pump here, and it moves sodium out in excess over potassium in. We have excess positive charge out. Potassium is positively charged. It doesn't want to move into that more positively charged compartment. So what we see for potassium, things are interesting. Potassium goes downhill in response to concentration, but uphill in response to membrane potential. So it just depends on who wins out. If the concentration gradient is more important, then potassium will flow out. If the membrane potential is more important, then potassium flows back. If we are at equilibrium, then the two are in balance. In real life, in mammalian cells, the presence of potassium channels actually sets the membrane potential, the steepness of the membrane potential that we get. So we have a potassium concentration gradient. Potassium flows out, adding to the membrane potential, up to the point that that effective charge balances the effective concentration. That is our resting membrane potential. Okay, so to put it in words, most membranes have significant ion gradients. That's just the way it is. The only exceptions are those membranes that have large pores, the porins, so that's the bacterial outer membrane and the outer membrane of chloroplasts and mitochondria. These have the big pores, the porins. So what is the typical ion that is the driving ion? In mammalian cells and animal cells, you have sodium as the driving ion. The driving pump is the sodium-potassium pump. Sodium-potassium P-type ATPase. It's that same pump. The membrane potential is set by potassium leak channels. That's a channel that allows potassium to get back out. And that sets the membrane potential such that we have an excess negative charge inside and an excess positive charge outside. This is, by the way, a universal rule in life. We always have, for resting, say the normal membrane potential, it's positive outside of the cell, negative inside. You can call this the positive outside rule. Okay, so what do plants and fungi do, and the majority of the bacteria? They also have a negative set of, or excess negative charges inside the cell over outside. It's due to proton gradients, and the proton gradients are created by proton pumping systems. These can be P-class pumps, or these can be respiratory or photosynthetic electron transport systems, but they're pumping systems. So, animal cells, sodium gradient, positive out. Any other system, positive out, proton gradient. Hydrogen ion gradient. I think you need to remember that. So why is this such a big deal? These ion gradients are used for a lot of biology. So first of all, things that require energy tap into these gradients. So secondary active transport becomes possible. In some cases, we need to move a protein across the membrane. For instance, to form the mitochondria takes up a lot of proteins from the cytosol, specific proteins. That is an energy requiring process. Part of the energy comes from the membrane electrochemical gradients across the inner membrane. So that's an important point. Then signaling, especially in neurons, becomes possible. We'll see after the exam action potentials that are important in the functioning of the nervous system. Signaling becomes possible. Bacteria can swim. If they can, they have a flagellum, and the flagellum rotates, and that's made possible by the proton gradient across the bacterial inner membrane. I'd like to mention that this bacterial flagellum structurally is unrelated to the eukaryotic flagellum. So it's only bacteria that do this. And then finally, the whole mechanism by which ATP is formed in mitochondria and in chloroplasts, as well as in bacteria, it involves these electrochemical gradients, specifically proton gradients. So we call it energy conversion. So you need to know these 4 or 5 main points of why electrochemical gradients are so important in life. If I ask you, you need to know at least 3. Okay. So that's something you have to remember. Right. So now what do we have to do? After the exam, we'll look at how this all quantitatively works. And we'll look at why transporters use 2 sodium in one case and 1 sodium in the other case, things like that. We'll look at action potentials, working of the nervous system, and then the mechanism of respiration and photosynthesis, which all depends on these electrochemical gradients. For now, let's look at some transport systems and how they make sense in biology. So we'll look at storage in the vacuoles, how mammalian cells control pH, and then 2 systems in our epithelial parts in the epithelia of our digestive tract that together control the acidification, or one controls the acidification of the stomach, and the other is involved in the uptake of nutrients. So we'll look at those. So first, let's look at a vacuole. So this, in this case, is actually a vacuole of a plant. It could be a vacuole of a fungus as well. So let's look at this system. This is the membrane in gray. So this is the lumen, that's the space in the vacuole. The purpose is to store things there that you don't want in the cytosol. You don't want some things in the cytosol because osmotic pressure needs to be correct, and you need to have the right solute composition, where enzymes need to be heavy. So how do we get things across the membrane and to accumulate here? Well, we need a driving gradient, and in this system, since it's not a mammalian cell membrane, it's going to be a proton system. So we have 2 proton pumps. There's a P-class pump here, and it uses the energy stored in ATP to move protons across the membrane. And here is another transporter. This is that V-class type transporter, which uses the energy of pyrophosphate, splits that, and it can also move protons. So we accumulate protons. So the pH in the lumen is low, and therefore it's positively charged also here. So we see the membrane potential. So we have excess protons inside, fewer protons outside. So if we have pH 3 in the lumen, that means we have a 10 to the negative 3 molar proton concentration, so 1 millimolar protons. In the cytoplasm, we're close to pH 7, so it's 10 to the negative 7 proton concentration. So the ratio is 10 to the 4th. Right? If the pH is 3 inside and outside is 7, the ratio, the concentration of 10 to the 4th, 10,000-fold more. Alright, here's our proton gradient. So here we have a couple of things we need to stuff in the vacuole. For instance, sodium. Plants don't like sodium in their cytosol, so they want to put it in the vacuole. So they use the proton gradient to move that out. and sodium can move in. So this is an antiporter. So if we think about this antiport system here, the movement of protons out of the vacuole, is that favored by the membrane potential? Think yes or no? It's negative out, it's positive in, protons are positively charged, so the protons are attracted by the more negative exterior. Okay. Positive out, this is the outside world again. So we're positive outside of the cytoplasm, we're negative inside the cytoplasm. So protons are favored by the membrane potential. Were protons favored by their own concentration? We think of proton flow through this antiporter. Yes or no? I would think it's a yes, because we had a low pH or excess protons. So we can answer the same questions here for this calcium exchange system. The calcium is favored to move in because protons move out. How about here if we uptake sucrose in the vacuole? So if we take up sucrose in the vacuole, the protons were favored to move out. Is sucrose, would you think that that is favored by its own concentration if it accumulates in the vacuole? I see a no, yes, yes. Who thinks that sucrose is favored to move through this transporter because of its own concentration ratio? This transporter accumulates, so we have a high concentration of sucrose inside, a low concentration in the cytosol. So sucrose moves against concentration. That's not favored by itself, but the transport becomes possible because the protons are very favored because of their own concentration and because of the membrane potential. Sucrose is uncharged, so it's not touched by the membrane potential. So sucrose is not touched here by the membrane potential. So sucrose unfavored by concentration, but because protons are very favored by concentration and membrane potential, sucrose together in this antiport system can get in. If we go back here to our sodium antiporter, is the movement of sodium favored by its own concentration if we accumulate sodium in the vacuole? Of course, it depends on where we are, right? But ultimately, if we accumulate all the sodium in the vacuole, then we get a high concentration there, so it wouldn't be favored. Is the movement of sodium in the vacuole favored by the membrane potential? Ask if you have a question.
Yeah, I have a question. So inside the vacuole, is it positive or negative right now?
It's going to be more positive inside the vacuole. So if you think about the positive outside lumen, then you have to think that the inside of the cell is the cytosol. And then actually the lumen of the vacuole is the outside world. We're thinking from the perspective of the cell's cytosol, or from the perspective of nucleic acids, RNA and DNA. So is sodium movement in the lumen of the vacuole favored by the membrane potential? No, it's not. Now we have some other transport systems here. These ion channels. So if we want to accumulate chlorine to a higher concentration inside the lumen, that's not favored by the concentration of chlorine, right? So we have low in the cytoplasm and relatively high in the lumen. Would the movement of chlorine be favored by the membrane potential? Yes, because of what you see, and it also has to be the case because it's not favored by its own concentration. And it's the same story here for this nitrate. Okay, let's go to the next system. Our cells mammalian cells need to control their pH. How can we do it? Well, we have a couple of antiport systems, and they're depicted here at the top. So there's an antiporter that takes a proton out when a sodium comes in. There's another antiporter that takes a sodium together with bicarbonate ion, this is bicarbonate, and a chlorine goes out. And then finally we have here an antiporter, chlorine can come in and bicarbonate is moved out. Now it turns out that these three transport systems each have an optimal activity, so that we can consider them as enzymes, with a pH optimum. And the optimum pH that's in the cell for that transporter determines whether that transporter will do a lot, yes or no. So we want the pH in our cells to be around 7.2. So if we're lower, at a lower pH, we have more protons in our cells. We need to get rid of the protons. So in that condition, it makes sense to have a transporter active that uses the sodium gradient to move a proton out. And that transporter is especially active when the pH is too low and there's excess of protons. Similarly, we have a second transporter that uses the energy stored in the sodium gradient to move chlorine out. And that's not the most important part, but it brings bicarbonate in. And it just exchanges a charge for a charge when we think about the chlorine and the bicarbonate. So this transporter functions in the following way. It brings bicarbonate in, and here is our bicarbonate ion. Bicarbonate is essentially a source of hydroxide ions, because bicarbonate is essentially carbon dioxide together with a hydroxide ion. So if we import bicarbonate, we essentially import hydroxide ions. This dissociation occurs, and hydroxide